Howdy, y'all. Semantics is back. Took a few weeks off, but we are back, and we are joined by Anthony Campolo. Anthony, it feels kind of poetic that you would be the first stream back.
Yep. I think I'm definitely. I mean, I had the record on my last stream, but I'm like solidifying my record here. This will be my fourth time on Semantics.
Cybershock, thank you for the follow. Yeah, this will be your fourth time. We've had you come in for various accessibility things, particularly around the Redwood space. And then last time you were on, you showed me Vite. You've got kind of this fascination with build tools. It seems like, and so today we're here to talk about Deno. Um, what is Deno, and why should developers care?
Sure. So this is going to be a little outside of your typical wheelhouse, but much like the Beat episode, part of the reason why I suggested it is because I know that you have a deep love and appreciation for web standards and projects that build upon web standards instead of just inventing their own nonsense to do whatever they want to do. And Deno is a replacement for Node. So Node.js being a server-side implementation of JavaScript. Most people think of JavaScript as a language that runs in the browser, but it can be run really anywhere you want. So if you want to create a backend server, traditionally you would use Node.js. And some people may know that Node.js is not exactly the same as the JavaScript that runs in the browser because they've built up some of their own standards over the years in terms of their own module system and things like that. But Deno is this idea of what if we could rebuild Node from the ground up, but using core web standards. So we'll be using ESM, ES modules. We'll be using, we won't be using today, but you can use the fetch API, just the regular old fetch API. You don't need to use like node fetch. So I would say that the main thing it gives you is a more modern, more updated way to write server-side JavaScript that is more
Mm-hmm.
in line with the JavaScript you were probably already writing in the browser.
It almost sounds to me like in a way Deno is to Node what ESBuild and Vite are to Webpack, right? It's like building on the lessons learned from those tools, but using kind of more modern standards and tech. Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely, yeah, and that means this comes with all the same caveats we gave for that episode, which is this is newer. There's going to be bugs. There's going to be hiccups. But I really think it's important for developers to be aware of like what is the new thing coming up, not to follow the hype train, but to acknowledge the fact that these aren't like laws of nature. Like there was a time when Webpack didn't exist. There's a time when even Node didn't exist. So all things shall come to pass in terms of these tools are eventually going to be replaced by something newer. So I think it's always good to kind of keep an eye to the future in terms of what are the things that are being introduced that may become the new standards that we use now. Deno is of course not the standard right now, has
Mm-hmm.
not replaced Node, and whether even will or not is really still up for debate. And we'll see many years from now probably. But I think that it is good in terms of giving you an idea of how is the web evolving, what are the trends to kind of pay attention to, and then when you're in a position where you may have to decide between one or the other, you can at least make an informed decision and not just say, okay, well, I'm going to start on Deno. I guess I should use Deno. It's like, well, no, you should learn what Deno actually is and what are the actual differences, and then you can make an informed decision about whether to use it or not for your specific project or use case.
I love that. I love that. So let's go ahead and start diving in. Right now, I've just been showing our faces, but now I'm sharing my screen and we're looking at your Twitter. Go follow Anthony on Twitter. Because, I mean, first of all, your shit posts are great. But also, you've been, like, just the whole time I've known you, you've been such a prolific author of many dev2 posts, and I'm guessing every single one of those gets promoted here. Speaking of dev2, you've got an article that covers a lot of the same stuff that we're doing today. It's a first look at Oak. So Oak is not Deno. Do you want to kind of walk us through what we're doing and how Deno and Oak fit together?
Sure. Most people who do know Node and have worked with Node knows that you usually will use some sort of framework for HTTP requests, Express being the most well-known, and it's a wrapper on top of the core HTTP module in either Node, or in this case, it's going to be Deno. And so there's a slightly different version of Express known as Koa, and so this is really influenced more by Koa than Express. And so some people may have realized that Deno is the letters of Node kind of rearranged, and Oak is the letters of Koa slightly rearranged. So
Ridiculous.
pretty clever there. But that's all it really is Oak is going to be a slightly nicer abstraction that is going to allow us to create a web server that can take requests and give responses to those requests, whether it's pure text or JSON or HTML, whatever it is that you want to respond to requests that you get.
All right. Yeah, so let's go ahead and dive in. Now, I put the link to this in the chat. If you were planning on following along, you should definitely go to this article because, full disclosure, I will not be installing Deno on this stream. Anyone who's done any streaming knows that the single most likely thing to take down a stream is having to install something new. And so I installed Deno and this deployctl control ahead of time. Just to make sure that everything worked on my machine before hopping on the stream. So we have already gone through these steps, or I have rather, on my machine ahead of time. Do you want to kind of talk through these steps first?
Yeah, and this is just one way to do this. I also gave some links here to other ways to do this because with any downloading thing, it's going to depend on what's your operating system. Are you on a Mac? Are you on a Windows? And so this is just a basic curl command that installs an install script from deno.land. And as we go on, we'll actually talk about this a little bit, how Deno.land is kind of like the home base for where you get Deno packages. There is no NPM for Deno. There's a tight integration between the company that is building Deno and the company that is using the Deno.land. So there is like an actual Deno company. And so this is actually
Okay.
kind of interesting because back when Node was created, there was different companies that were kind of building it together. There was Joint, which had kind of the main team behind it, and then there was NPM, which was a completely separate company that where all the node packages were. So that's actually one of the kind of more meta concerns here, which is how do we also get this code in a place where people can like get it? So that install script, you can just go to deno.land and like look at that script and see exactly what it's doing if you want. But there's a whole bunch of install instructions. You can use brew, you can use really whatever you want. And so this is the install script that will run on your computer. And then the main thing you want to think about is just like what is your operating system. And so there should be instructions there for whichever you use, whether you're on Windows, Mac, kind of whatever. So the main kind of install scripts that I put in there is the first one, the one that they recommend you use.
Joe in the chat is asking if I could at least start the download and then pull the prepared download out of the oven in the classic. Here's one I cooked earlier. I do enjoy this pivot. Semantics is now no longer about the web. It is the cooking show you've been looking for. I am gonna have to update my Twitch stream category real quick to cooking. But yeah, so um those are the installation steps. I found this fairly straightforward. There was no concerns I had with running this, but if you're looking to follow along, that is a thing that you will need to do.
Yeah, and then for the deploy cuddle, what that is this is going to be for Deno deploy, which depending on how much time this takes as we go, we may or may not get to this step, but there's a also hosting service that goes along with Deno now, where you can deploy your Deno or Oak server, much like you would Netlify or Vercel kind of front end static
Mhm.
website. You have a way to sync it to your GitHub repo, and so deployctl is a way to locally test the service that will be
Oh, okay.
deploying your thing. So this is also a big thing with cloud services and how do you get like a local dev experience. So there's usually tools that are designed to emulate the hosting provider that's going to host this. So if when we get to this point kind of in the project, when we run the deployctl, it's going to show us the exact same thing as if we're just running the regular Deno command, but the idea being is it'll let you know if something's going to break before you actually deploy it.
Gotcha. And it's you mentioned to me that, or you mentioned that it's analogous to like Netlify or Vercel. I would also say it sounds like if you've ever done Heroku, right? It because Netlify and Vercel, you're not really running the backend stuff there. You're not really deploying full APIs. You're maybe deploying like serverless functions, but Heroku would be, I guess, the analog that I would have for like the backend services.
Yeah, and the reason why I mentioned Netlify and Vercel is because they lean into the Git-based workflow, the
Ah, okay.
Git-based deploy, but you were correct in the sense that you're not running static assets on a CDN. You're running basically a serverless function. And so this is actually kind of funny when their servers first came out. I tried to just like deploy a Deno server to it, and it didn't work. I went in the Discord and I'm like, "What's happening?" And they're like, "Dude, read the docs. That's not what it's for. You don't just run a server on it. It's like actually for creating like a serverless function that will like export your project. So
Mm.
it's kind of this like weird mid ground between a server and a static front end. Because it's this whole serverless function thing, which is like a whole huge other conversation we really need to get into.
For sure. And then the next step here is create the project files. So I think at this point, maybe we diverge a bit from the doc and have you be my guide.
Yeah, totally. So you already have a project up and running. So why don't you just create an index.js? And this is a thing that you may have heard that Deno is for TypeScript. And it's true in the sense that if we wanted to make this a TypeScript file and start writing TypeScript, we wouldn't have to configure anything. We wouldn't need a ts.config file. But what's really cool is that you don't have to actually use TypeScript. If you just write JavaScript, the JavaScript will work as well. So we're going to stick to JavaScript land here. And before we start using Oak at all, and then Jason was asking in the chat about Oak framework, just hopped in. Oak is going to be a framework that builds on top of Deno, but actually wanted to start by just doing a simple Deno server.
Yeah,
So
I like it.
we're going to import this is going to be ESM, so import,
Nice.
and then in curlies, it's going to be listen and serve.
Are those
One word
lowercase?
camel case.
Okay.
Yeah.
Listen, serve. Oh, listen.
So
One.
actually, the word and, yeah.
Okay.
And then capital S. Yeah. And then that's going to be from HTTPS deno.land.
Deno.land. Okay, I'm typing URLs in here. I'm not used to that.
STD at 0.111.0 / HTTP / server.ts. And so this is, if you were following like the next conf recently, you may have heard about this URL imports, and everyone was like, "Ooh, URL imports. That's really interesting." This is something that Deno only does. Like this is how you actually import things in Deno. Is you pop in this URL here, and what's cool and what I like about this is you are being explicit about the version of your dependency. We're actually telling it which specific dependency and which version we're importing here.
So I could, in theory, I could import another method from another version of standard. It would seem.
Yeah, you can do another version, or you can leave the versioning out, and it will default to the newest one. If you're someone who likes your CI constantly breaking.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so this is getting me a listen and serve method here that we can get. Can I already start to like use this?
Yeah, absolutely. So go to the next line and then just create a function, listen and serve. So you don't need to say function. You can just do
we're calling
listen and serve. Yeah.
Okay.
And then and then inside there you're gonna have quotation marks and then colon 8080. And so that's going to set the port, and then do a comma after that. And then now we're going to do an anonymous function. So Yep. And then arrow. And then we'll do new response. Yep. And then inside that response, you can just say hello from semantics or something like that.
Hello from semantics. Just
Yep.
like
And
that.
then outside of that function entirely, we'll do a console.log. And then you can just say like server running on 8080 or something like that.
You got it.
Okay, and that should be all we need to do to get this response back. So now if we do, so you should go back to the blog post real quick and look at the run command. So right after that server we created, we see this, and this is worth pointing out. This may look obnoxious, but there's a very, very good reason for this, which is that Node itself is like a huge security disaster for anyone who is kind of not aware of this, that because Node is able to basically have all permissions at all times, if you download a malicious Node package, like your whole computer is owned, like effectively. Like it's done. It's over.
And this
So
happens occasionally. Like just recently, the UA parser library had a malicious version, and it was a dependency of dependencies for a whole bunch of projects like 11D, and so it was like installing a crypto miner, I think, was what it was
yeah, it
doing.
was crypto mining software. It also would export like all of your computer's passwords. Like it was a huge, terrible breach. And so Deno is created to be secure by default. So there's this concept called zero trust computing, which is that instead of starting with all permissions and then adding security on top, you start with zero permissions and make the user explicitly say when they're giving permissions. So that's why we have this --allow -net. So that's basically saying we want to give the ability to run this script.
Okay.
And then the watch command will be for just watching the server. So I think this means we're not going to need like nodemon or anything like that. We'll see if that actually ends up working or not. And then the node check is something I just include because if you don't, you get like weird TypeScript errors all the freaking time. So
Okay. So just go ahead and run this.
yeah, and then that should work for us. And then we'll see a little output saying server running. That's good. So then let's go open up a browser and take a look at our local host 8080 and see if the magic happens.
Okay.
All right.
Doesn't look like it. Do I
Good.
need to return the response?
So what I was gonna say is get rid of the brackets and just put it all on one line.
Okay.
Yeah, like that.
So handle implicit returns. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try this. And it should, because we did the watch command, it should just rebuild. So this, we would think, would work.
Okay, so try rerunning the server real quick.
Yeah. There we go.
There we go. Yeah, cool. Awesome. So that is your Deno HTTP hello world. And once we kind of add in Oak, we'll show how to actually do like HTML. We'll show how to do some routing, but this is just the most basic way to give a response from a Deno server. So it's less code than you would do for like a Node server, and it's got everything kind of built in for you in terms like you don't need to bring in other packages or anything else. And we didn't even need like a package.json because we're importing from the URL. So
that's awesome.
Your Deno hello world.
That is incredibly cool. Very ergonomic. That's all I need. I don't even have to tell people like, oh, run the npm install command to get this set up. Like, it feels like that's just a nice, sharp onboarding experience.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's why just installing Deno is kind of the big thing to figure out. Once you got it executable on your computer, then you're basically good to go. And this is one of the reasons why the team has worked very hard on like keeping this as like a single lean executable binary, because then this is very useful for putting it on other servers and running serverless functions and doing all that kind of stuff. So we can actually get into the Oak stuff now. So instead of you can leave most of that stuff up there for now for the import. You can delete the other lines, so we'll just kind of modify this import. Instead of listen and serve, we're going to import application, just one word, capital A.
Okay. Capital A, application.
Yep. And then where it says, so keep https deno.land and then delete everything else.
Okay.
Yep. And then do the letter X and then /. And so these are now going to be third-party modules because there's a standard library that we're importing for, but there's also kind of like blessed third-party modules. And Oak is from essentially the same team that does Deno, so you can feel pretty confident that's going to work well. And just type the word Oak, and then at v9.0.1, and then / mod.ts.
Like that?
Yep. Yeah, so that should be our Oak dependency. And then what we're going to do will be similar to like Express or any of these things. You're going to do a const and then create a variable called just like app, all lowercase, and then equals new application. Yep, just like that. And then go to the next line, leave that just like it is. And then we're going to do app.use. Yep, and then parentheses, and then another parentheses, and write CTX for context. Yep.
Okay.
And then outside of those parentheses, do an arrow function. Yep. And then, yeah, just like that. And then we're going to do ctx.response.body.
Okay.
And yep, and so this is just pulling out the body in the response. And then we're going to do equals, and then in quotes, you can say hello from Oak or something like that.
All right.
Great. And then that's all good. So create a whole other line now outside of that. Yep. And then we'll do app.add event listener.
Okay.
And so going back to browser APIs, we're just adding an event listener. And then in quotes, do listen. Yep. And then comma after that. And then do arrow function. Yep. And then inside the curlies, do console.log. And then you just say server running on port 8080 or something like that.
You got it.
And then outside of all of that, we will then do an app.listen. Yep. And then parentheses, and then curly braces inside the parentheses.
We're destructuring a parameter. Okay.
Yeah. So you just need one of the parentheses.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, parentheses and then curlies. Yeah, you got it.
And we're got it. Not destructuring. We're just passing a configuration object. Okay.
Yeah, so it's gonna be port : 8080. So this is where we actually tell it the port. Yeah.
And that's as a number and not a string.
Yeah, just like that. That should do it.
Okay. So we're gonna tell it to listen on port 8080, and then once it knows to start listening, or once we tell it to start listening, it's gonna log this, and then once we hit it, the at port 8080, then it's going to return hello from Oak. Is what I expect.
Yep.
Okay. I'm just gonna rerun that.
Yeah, and then you see what's happening right now is it's actually getting your dependencies while you do that, and then checks the file, and then now is actually running it. So those are kind of your Deno Oak dependencies specifically.
Okay. So it's doing that whenever I run this. Does that mean it's gonna do that every time I run it, or is there any way that Deno caches those dependencies in any way?
So I know that just when I'm working with it, it doesn't have to do that every single time. So I'm not exactly sure how that works, okay. But it does cache it somehow. So yeah, this is an interesting thing with the import URL stuff. Is just like, how does like any of this stuff actually work under the covers?
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure, but it's a thing.
All right, well, it seems to be working. We're now getting hello from Oak, so everything seems to still be working.
Yeah, so this is good. So right now we haven't really done anything different. We've kind of just created our Oak server now and had it do the exact same thing that our Deno server was doing. But now what's really nice is we can start adding in some more kind of complicated stuff if we want to now. Let's say we want to send some HTML instead of just sending plain text. So inside of your app.use, under the context response body, and you can leave that there, add another line, and this will be ctx.response. And then, yeah, if you see dot header, it'll show you kind of a lot of stuff that we can do here. And so we're going to do the headers and then do dot set. So it'll be headers with an S.
Headers.set. Okay.
Yep. And then we'll do in quotes content type.
Ooh.
And this should
Like
be
that.
pretty familiar to anyone who's done this type of stuff before. And then in quotes, text/HTML.
All right.
And now we can do up in that body, we can throw some H2s or anything like that just around it, and it'll interpret the HTML correctly. Hello, HTML.
Okay.
Yeah, and that should be all we have to do. So you should be able to save that and then go back to the browser, and now this will be nice and large.
Something about the watch mode doesn't seem to be working.
Yeah, I wasn't really sure about that. So that's one of the
there
things.
We go.
Still probably iron out the kinks on that. But yeah, so there is now our HTML, which is pretty cool.
Pretty snazzy.
Yeah. All right, so the next question most people would ask is like, okay, well, is there a router though? Because with things like Express and Koa, what you're really getting, not just the nice conventions and the syntax, that you're also getting a router built in for you as well. So if we go back to our index.js, along with importing the application, we're also going to import router. So just one word, capitalized router. And then above the app declaration, we will have const router equals new router.
Do we pass it any configurations or anything?
Nope.
Okay.
No need, not yet. Well, we will in a second, but first what we want to do is where it does say app.use is change that to say router.get.
Okay, so this is router.get.
Yep. And then before the context object, we're going to add quotes with a /. So it'll know that that'll be, yep, and then a comma. Yeah, there you go.
Got it.
And then that should set that all up correctly to now respond on our home route. And then
so we could do something like this again. I'm just guessing here, free form here. I could do something like this. I rerun. Ooh, hello. No middleware to process.
So we're almost there. We're not.
Okay.
So we haven't done the. Yeah.
Okay.
But you're on the money with all of that. So then, after that, on the above the event listener but below the router, do app.use, and then pass in router.routes, and then add some parentheses after routes. Yeah. And then one more line separate from all that, and then app.use, and then pass in router.allowed methods.
And is this also a method that we call?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Now we should be all set.
All right. Seems to be running. So if I hit this, it still shows my basic HTML here, but then I can go to /about, and it says all about Oak. Okay, so we can get multiple routes going. That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool, and this is kind of like our hello world of how to do basic routes. So if you're someone who's used Express or if you've used Koa before, everything we're doing should be fairly comprehensible.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that I really like about Deno and these libraries is that they're not trying to like totally reinvent the wheel. They're like, we still want to give people the APIs that they expect, but we want to build in newer, more modern tech around it and just like make some slight tweaks here and there. So to me, if I was someone who was like learning web dev today, like this would be really nice because you get to leverage things like already understanding event listeners and already understanding like the ESM syntax, but then you just have to add on a couple more things to actually be like, okay, but how does like this like Deno, backend thing kind of work? But it's already in the same wheelhouse of things you're learning
Yeah,
as like a front end web developer. So there's a lot more just like synergy between the two different things you'd be learning.
that's awesome. Okay. So what is next for our humble little server here?
Yeah. And if anyone in the chat has any questions about what we've done so far, hopefully this is all fairly straightforward so far. Now, I want to get into the Deno deploy stuff now.
Okay.
So if we go to deno.com/deploy, then we can check this out. And this will
Deno.com or
be
.land?
it's Deno.com. Yeah.
Okay.
So the Deno.land and Deno.com, they're both, this is still all the Deno company. It's the same people behind it, but this is something that was made after Deno.land. Deno.land has been around for as long as kind of the project has been around, whereas Deno deploy is I think maybe like 6 months old or so. It's not as long standing as the Deno project itself, but this is kind of like once they got VC dollars and they're like, all right, what are we actually going to do with this thing? Like, well, we'll build a deployment platform, obviously, because
Mm-hmm.
that's what everyone does now.
Yeah.
And if you see on the right, we have this hello.js, which is not exactly what we're going to be building, but it's kind of fairly similar in terms of we have like the listen and serve there. But what they're doing actually that's kind of cool is they're showing that you can just throw like JSX in if you want. And so
Oh.
if you click ssr.jsx on the top, I think
Okay.
is that an actual example or yeah,
Oh. Oh.
yeah.
Okay. That's where I was. Okay. Got it.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're giving you nice conventions to basically build your own kind of like next clone if you want, because they have SSR and then they have JSX parsing and they have all this stuff already built in. We're not going to get into any of this today, but for people who do find that interesting, I actually have a Deno deploy blog post where I get into that a little bit. So this is going to be taking a little bit of that post, but just to actually like deploy the Oak part. We're not going to get into any of the JSX stuff.
Okay.
So what we want to do now is we want to get our project that we created up on a Git repo.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Can do. Let's see. Do I have access to the? Okay. Cool. I do have that in here. All right.
I love the GitHub CLI. I use all the time now, mostly just to create repos, but even just for that, it's really nice.
Yeah. Create an Oak server. Okay.
And this
then...
is what I had been talking about earlier in the stream, that the Deno deploy is set up to just sync to a GitHub repo, which is really nice because then you get this nice workflow where you can just push changes to your repo and then it's automatically get synced on your live deployed project. And there's just a couple things that you kind of have to do to get it to work. We're going to end up installing kind of like a Deno GitHub application, I think. So let's first give this a look.
Yeah, it opened it up in Opera. Forever my prop. I know. But we should have a new repo up, and in fact, I
Are
might
you going to
actually.
be contractually obligated to use Edge now?
It's a great question. Probably not.
I don't know.
For folks in the audience who are new, I'm gonna be starting a new role at Microsoft soon, so super excited for that. But I don't think they require us to use Edge. I'd have to check in with some folks I know there. Okay. So now everything's been added. And I actually probably will need to have this open in Opera because I am not signed in on this browser profile.
That's funny. Do you actually use Opera?
I do. I do. It's my day-to-day browser for some reason. I don't know. I'll probably move away shortly.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, what's the pitch
Um,
for Opera?
so this is Opera GX, or I have Opera GX, which is pitched as a quote-unquote gaming browser because it's supposed to give you more fine-tuned control into the performance internals, which I figured would be nice for streaming. It's got some like extra like extensions and plugins for like you can sign in with your Twitch account and it'll show you like who's actively online and stuff like that. Like there were reasons I went with it, but I don't know that I'm gonna stick with it.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so let's go to now. Let me see. So if you go to github.com/apps and then /Deno deploy.
I do need to be logged in on GitHub for this, right?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, yeah, then let me actually open this up in Opera. GitHub.com apps slash what did you say?
Deno deploy.
Deno dash deploy.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's funny. Someone's mentioning Vivaldi in the chat. I was listening to I think it was JS Party. They had like a competition between the syntax host and the shop talk host. They had like a trivia game, and one of the questions was about like browsers, and there's like one final browser they were trying to like get, and someone's like Vivaldi, and it's being Vivaldi, and they're like, what? What's
Incredible.
Vivaldi?
Um anyways, I'm proud to represent the population of one person who uses Opera GX. I am that person. You found them. Um all right, shall we I guess install this application?
Yeah, and so for anyone who doesn't know what GitHub apps are, these are just a way to very simply configure your repos to work with some sort of outside service. So in this case, you're going to be giving read access to metadata and read and write access to some other stuff. So for people who are like crazy about security, you may only want to give this to select repos. We only need to access this one repo here, so that will be totally good. Make sure, yeah, you got it selected. Yep. And then, yeah, so that should all be set. I'm always like wondering like how much these like permission things matter, because there's like such a huge amount of like things I've given access to my GitHub at this point. All right, so now we are in there. So now if you just log in, so I think you already are logged in, it looks like. So try just clicking new. Let's see what happens.
Ooh. Yeah. There we go. All right, new project.
There we go. Yeah, yep, new project. Great, and then give it I would probably just give it the same name as my repo.
Yeah. Does it need to be like globally unique or just unique to my own projects?
No idea.
We'll see if that works. Seems like it works. Okay.
Yeah, that should be fine. Yeah. Cool. And so then we will scroll down to where it says deploy from GitHub. So it gives you kind of some just basic things you can do, but we already got a Git repo, so we know we're going to do that. So hit continue on deploy from GitHub.
Okay.
Great. And then this part might be a little bit tricky because I think they actually may have fixed this, but in the past you had to use the raw link, but right now it's saying you can just do this. So I'm actually kind of curious if that will work or not. So it's not letting you click the link. So I think you need to actually put the raw one in. So if we go back to our GitHub repo and then just look at the actual index.js file, right? Okay. And then click raw next to blame. So if we grab this, and so I think the reason why is because they just need the code. They're like, we don't really. Yeah, so cool. So now we're going to go ahead and link that. And this should be all we need to do. And the reason why this works is because I kind of created the example from the start, already looking at the Deno deploy example. So if you just write a regular old Oak server, server, you may get some issues like I did when I very first tried Deno deploy. So you should check the actual Deno deploy docs if you want to do this, and they'll let you know how to actually get like a correct configuration for your server. Because if you just try and run a regular server, it might not work. But I think that they're like converging on a way to where it's basically just gonna like work no matter what. So let's now click the view, and I think we should be
Oh,
live.
okay. Yeah.
Boom.
Well,
Yeah, and then
excellent.
check the about.
Very
Sweet.
cool.
So
Very
cool.
cool.
Yeah. So this is like really pretty simple workflow,
That was
especially
yeah,
for getting a whole server
that was a
up and
very pleasant
running.
onboarding experience for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, it's great. It's great. They've done a good job of kind of honing the UX of using it. So I'm a big fan, and I think that if you're someone who really likes playing around with like new deployment platforms, like I do, I was like super impressed by it. And I was like, oh yeah, this is actually something I can see myself like actually using and building with.
Mm-hmm. I'm also just appreciating that Deno owns Deno.land, Deno.dev, Deno.com, probably Deno.pizza if I had to guess.
And Dino Pizza, yeah. If not, I know what URL on mine.
um, we Travis in the chat. I am curious how Anthony gets involved with tree related projects. Yeah, between oak and redwood, um, trees are apparently your thing.
So one of the things that's like a thing that has become like a signature in my blog posts is I'll put some sort of ridiculous comment in my initial commit. And so the initial commit on the oak one is finally another project named after a tree.
Incredible. Jace wants to see your forest of
Forest
projects.
of
I
projects.
love it.
Uh,
Chat, continue to deliver on those tree puns, please.
yeah, no, please. We need 18 more minutes of
Yeah.
tree puns because I'm out of code.
Yeah, we're not out of the woods yet.
Yeah, so like we're done. Like that's kind of the whole thing that I wanted to show. So
Oh my
I think
goodness.
that the fact that we were able to kind of do all of this within the span of not even a full stream is a good example of like one the speed of these tools that we're using. Because one thing we didn't talk about is that Deno is built on Rust. And if you're not aware, Rust is fast. Rust is very fast. This is one of the reasons why people love Rust so much. So we have an awesome, super fast, super speedy dev experience. And then once we actually get it deployed as well, there's like no build times as far as I can tell. So I'm not sure if that's just because they already have infra just spun up for you. So an interesting kind of like side note here is that Deno itself is now being used to build serverless function platforms. So if you have heard of Netlify's edge handlers, this is not very well advertised, but Netlify just laughing at the chat. Not heck of a branching strategy. But Netlify edge handlers are built on Deno. So Deno itself, like they have a serverless deployment platform, but if you want to actually build your own serverless deployment platform, Deno is now like a tool to do that with. So got super duper quick cold starts, and it's just well optimized for having a server up and running really, really fast.
Awesome. One question I've got is because everything's being pulled in from URLs and such. Like I noticed that we've been pulling in TypeScript files, and yet because we're pulling it in from this URL, my editor doesn't seem to know about any of the like type completion. Is there anything I can do to improve that dev experience? Do you know?
Yeah, that's a good question, and this is where I think there's probably going to be a Deno extension, I would guess. So if we check VS Code Deno extension, it looks like they have a dedicated language extension with the Deno language server. So I have to imagine this would give you that, or else I don't even know what the point of this would be. So we look at this that we're seeing in the preview there. It's giving some autocomplete and errors and things like that. So I would guess that this is probably going to be what you would want to get all that. And it's a good point. Like I am a little bit TypeScript averse, so I tend to avoid even like thinking about these types of issues. But it is built on TypeScript, so we should actually be figuring out how to get the benefit of TypeScript. So we see here we're getting autocomplete, and why don't you just try and like mess with the URL so you can like get an error there.
Yeah, so if I just, mod.gif, it probably wouldn't be happy with. Oh, I may need to like restart the editor for some of these things to take effect. Would be my guess, but
Yeah, yeah, probably.
yeah, okay. So there are tools for getting that kind of dev experience.
Yeah, and also because I had added like the dash dash no check, that's why we weren't getting like type checked when we ran our
Ah,
server. But you can also get type checking in that as well. The only problem is I found that I get weird type errors sometimes, like depending on like where I'm importing it from, because you don't necessarily have to import from deno.land. There's like other CDNs, like there's one called like esm.sh, I think, is some ESM CDN. And I went down this like huge rabbit hole with this other Deno project who were getting all these weird type errors, and I went and like opened an issue, and they're like, "Oh, that's an issue with ESM .sh." And I'm like, "Well, but it's your project, so it's an issue for you too." And this is why like TypeScript just always adds weird bugs that I don't understand and don't know how to deal with. So that's why I sometimes just chuck the whole baby out with the bathwater, which I'm sure is probably not like a super smart thing to do. But if you add the dash dash no check, you will avoid these weird, obscure TypeScript errors. So just
totally
a
fair.
little tip.
Okay. So I guess are there any other things you can think of that we might want to show off or do with kind of the time that we've got left?
Yeah, I mean, we could try doing some of the JSX stuff if we want. Let's check out in my Deno deploy example. I
Yeah,
dropped that in the chat not too long ago.
pulling that up. Let's see. Here it is. Okay. All right. Let's see. I see some, yeah, response stuff that feels very familiar.
Yeah, so
Deploy.
the one thing you're going to want to do is first you're going to have to rename your index.js to index.jsx.
Okay. Yeah. Uh, it's probably possible for me to. Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, I'll do that here. Uh, create extra files. There we go. And so now I think I saw I needed an extra import somewhere to be able to handle that,
So
like with the H
I would
import.
just go back to that blog example and then just grab the whole code block towards the end. So that big old code block right there. So what this is going to do is this is going to create an app function that's going to return the JSX. And then we have this render to string method that is bringing in preact. So this isn't technically React, technically preact, but basically the same thing. And then I think that H is for hydrate, I would guess. But this should be basically all we need to get this going. So
Seems to think.
so that's not entirely right because you
Okay.
should have an extra curly and parentheses after the response.
Like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, let's give this a
Okay, and it
shot.
looks like we're not using the H method at all, so that's probably just because I copied this code example from somewhere.
So my understanding
Bad
of
choice.
H as it comes from Preact is like this is it. It's like when you have to do like import React from React to get the JSX parser to like recognize that React is in scope, so it knows what to
Mm.
do with the JSX syntax. Because all of this has to be like transpiled into functions, like function calls, and so having the like H in scope is Preact equivalent to having React in scope to know what the JSX actually gets transpiled to. It's an odd thing.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's what. Yeah, Travis in the chat is saying H is Preact's equivalent to React.create element. So
Yes.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Oh, it turns out I have to
Yeah,
run the specific file. Turns out that's important.
yeah, and then we see here we're getting a couple different dependencies downloaded now. Okay, so this might be because we are. So are you still saying no check in there?
Yes.
Okay. Interesting. All right, this might be then because dependencies have changed since the last
Fair.
time I did this. So
Yeah.
let me see if I can get this running on my computer and see what
If
happens.
not, I'm not terribly worried, but it does seem like you can do some really cool things with this. Um, yeah, and
I'll just check this real quick on my computer. If it doesn't work, then we'll just say screw it. But
yep.
yeah, it's one of those things where, as I said at the beginning, this is a newer project. There's going to be some weird bugs and stuff like that that could happen. So always,
Mhm.
be careful when you're trying new tech, and start first with just like a basic kind of sample project on your own computer, and don't just try to like actually migrate anything important.
Yeah,
Like it's just not the thing you should be doing. But as you start testing newer things out and start getting into the habit of always kind of like seeing what the new cutting edge stuff is, you start to get like a kind of barometer of like how ready things actually are
yeah,
for production. And so it's like, don't be afraid of things breaking. It's like embrace the breakage, but at the same time like be smart about how you're using this stuff.
absolutely. We have a question in the chat. How does Deno handle peer dependencies?
Yes. So the idea is that every dependency should have everything it needs and should be just a single kind of executable. So if you're pulling in the Oak dependency like we were, that is just a single thing that you're pulling. Like there shouldn't be any peer dependencies. Now, I'm sure in practice, when people are actually building these projects, you end up with lots of peer dependencies. But I think when you're just using the kind of like blessed modules, they should have everything they need. So that is what I believe is the case with that.
Sounds good. Y'all, if you have any other questions, feel free to drop those in the chat. We've got a couple minutes left, and so we might be able to get to a few of those. In the meantime, I'm gonna ask you, what are you most excited about in Dino's future?
Yeah, I am just excited about more people kind of like knowing about it and trying it out, and just the idea of there even being an alternative to Node period, because it's one of those things where it's just the assumed thing to do, which is that you are going to be able to have a node project and do whatever you want to do, and you don't even need to think about alternatives. But I think that that's never good or like healthy for an ecosystem to just have one thing that everyone has to use. So the
Mm-hmm.
very fact that there is an alternative to node is what makes me really excited. And I think people have heard of Deno, like they know it's a thing, but because like it's still, people assume it's new, it's not ready, like they're not really like using it or playing with it. So I really urge people to just give it a try and see what it's like. I think with things like Deno deploy now, and with other serverless providers starting to pick it up, it's going to become a lot more stable a lot more quickly, because you're going to have actual companies using it and testing it out. So I think we're going to see a lot of these things start to stabilize. And actually realize the reason why this is not working is because this is designed to work on Deno deploy. This is what the
Oh,
deployctl command was for, is because you
oh,
actually want to run this with deployctl, not
let's,
with
yeah,
the Deno CLI.
let's do that. Do you have the deployctl command somewhere in here that I can? Ah, look at that. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, so take that, but add your, don't use the raw GitHub one. Just basically replace that with just index.jsx,
Okay.
and
I think
then
I can
that
just run
might
that
work.
one line then. Deployctl run index.jsx no check. Deployctl run index.jsx no check, like this. Ah, that's it seems like it's listening. Let's give this a shot. And that's gonna be at root. Hey,
Yeah,
okay, cool.
cool.
Yeah, that even just even if you're not doing very JSX-y things with it, just even simply having the syntax highlighting is so much nicer than,
Mm-hmm.
building an HTML string yourself.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Wow. Okay. Very cool.
Yeah, like Travis said, he's excited that they'll get better because of each other, and I think that this is absolutely true. I think that the fact that Deno existed and was like, we're ESM, like full stop, only ESM. I think that put pressure on the Node community to like figure ESM out faster than they may have had to otherwise. So I definitely agree that having other things in the space working on similar stuff, like it does push us all to like continue to get better, and you can't just like rest on your laurels. So I think that that's pretty cool, and it's great that there are people out there who want to continue to make the web better. It's also worth mentioning that Deno is from the creator of Node, so Ryan, who uh, what is Ryan's last name? I used to know this. Ryan Dahl. Duh. Yeah, so Ryan Dahl created Node, and what's funny is in 2012 he said, "Node is done. I am done with. I can leave because Node is finished." And it's like the idea of Node being finished in 2012 was like hilarious. But he stepped away from Node a long, long, long time ago, and then in 2018 he did a talk kind of talking about what he would have liked to do differently if he could rebuild Node from the ground up. And then at the end, he's like, by the way, I'm doing it. It's called Deno. And it's known as 10 Things I Regret About 10 Things I Regret About Node. And I actually found out that that is not the original talk title. And I used to watch that talk and be like, what are the 10 things? I can only count 8 regrets. And if you go, you can't actually find 10 whole regrets. And this is because the talk was originally called Design Mistakes in Node. And it was at JS Conf, and the JS Conf people were like, that's not an inflammatory enough title. We need to make this far more inflammatory and change the title to 10 Things I Regret About Node. Not even realizing that he didn't have 10 things in the talk.
Incredible. All right. Well, I think we're about time, so I want to go ahead and shout out your Twitter again. Go follow Anthony on Twitter if you aren't already. What are you working on? Is there anything that people should get hyped for?
Um, Always, man. Never stop working on things. Yeah, so we didn't talk at all about my job. I work for a company called StepZen. So StepZen, we are about to launch this massive new thing that we've been building for many, many months. And so it's not live yet, so I can't really show it to you yet. But within like the next week or two, actually, we're going to be launching this brand new GraphQL Studio, which is going to be a way to quickly connect to lots of different pre-built APIs with a GraphQL interface, basically. So there'll be pre-made schemas, they'll be configured, so you just have to basically put in your API key and it'll already authenticate you. And then you can actually combine different APIs together. So I've got an upcoming blog post where I'm going to show how to take your dev2 comments from a blog you've wrote and then pipe that into Google's sentiment analysis API to get like a positive or negative score for the comments on your blog post. So that's kind of thing that we've got going on, and I'm really, really excited for. Our team has been just like heads down for months working on this. So it's gonna be very exciting. So keep an eye on my Twitter or the StepZen Twitter for that in the next couple of weeks. And then Redwood is hopefully very, very close to a V1 release candidate within the next 1 or 2 minor releases. We're finally going to get there. We were originally planning to get V1 out by the end of last year, so we're like a whole year behind. But this is like so exciting. I've been working on Redwood for so long. It's really how I like made my name as a developer advocate. So really, really happy to get that out. And then yeah, obviously I've got my blog. I'm blogging all the time. But those are going to be kind of the main things going on is the graphical studio for StepZen and then the Redwood V1 and then follow my blog to kind of get more stuff on all of that.
Awesome. Well, thank you
And thank you
so
so
much.
much, Ben, for having me again. It's always an
Absolutely.
honor and a pleasure. So congrats on the new job as well. So happy for you. They're
Thank you so
really,
much.
really lucky to have you.
Thank you. And speaking of actually the new job, because I start in a handful of weeks, I'm gonna have to have another few weeks where I'm not going to be streaming because I'm going to be figuring out my new job schedule. So that will be like starting November 15th, like that period of time. There may be a few weeks without streams. And so to compensate, I'm doing double streams this week and next. So follow Semantics on Twitter. You'll find out what all the upcoming streams are. I'm really excited though. This Thursday we've got Carrie Fisher. That's Carrie with one R, so not Princess Leia. She's coming on to demonstrate accessible SVG practices. Super stoked for that. Next Tuesday, we've got Austin Krim coming on. We're going to be experimenting with the web audio API, which is incredibly rad. He's already sent me his demo. It's going to be so good. So you'll want to be there for that. And then next Wednesday, we've got Chance Strickland coming back on from the Remix team. We're going to be building, it sounds like, hey, welcome, Owen. Thanks for joining. It sounds like we're going to be building ourselves a Basecamp clone using Remix. And so those are the upcoming streams. That's this Thursday, next Tuesday, next Wednesday, all at 12 p.m. Central here at twitch.tv/someanticsdev. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a delight to have you on. I always learn new things, push myself in ways that I don't necessarily do a whole lot of. So thank you so much for demonstrating Deno today. Y'all, I'm gonna go find someone to raid, so stick around. But thanks for being here today. Bye.
Yeah, thanks everyone.